Hey guys, Chris here. So I've shown you guys a few very simple deadfalls. Deadfalls, I think personally, are a little bit better than snares because they can be set with less materials that you need to provide or procure or make, you know, cordage. So, but I'm going to show you a couple very simple snares. Now, this first snare is very simple, but it is mainly used in catching larger game. The second is where I took and modified, and I didn't come up with this snare. It's been around for a long time. But the reason I say I took and modified it is I learned the first snare when I was very young, and then I figured out through trial and error that I could improve upon that snare by changing one thing about it. But the first one, so this is known as the clog snare. Now, why is it called a clog snare? Well, here's our clog. Now, this works very good on deer sized animals, because what you do is you take your clog here and you lean it up against this side of the tree, the other side of the tree, this tree, a tree that's over here, back here. It doesn't matter, as long as it is standing on end and just lightly balancing against the tree there. So we'll go ahead and put this balancing on this back part over here. And now here is our snare here. So let's just say that this is a nice deer trail running through here. What you would want to do with this snare is set it about the size of the animal's, a little bit bigger than, well, not a little bit, but bigger to where it can fit its head in through the loop here. And we're just going to use Mother Nature to help us hold this up here, because a deer is a pretty big animal and they'll have no issues pulling this snare off of this tree here. So what's going to happen is your deer is going to come along here down the trail and get this caught around its neck. And then as it sucks this up, it's going to pull this clog off, and it's going to have to drag this thing everywhere it goes, or until it gets caught on something. Now what this does is it keeps the animal from struggling a lot more than it would if this snare was stationary. So it's less likely to break it. The only issue is now you have to track your animal to go find it. But this is a snare, it's been used for thousands of years, but it's known as the clog snare nowadays. Very simple, very easy to make. Now I'm going to show you the clog drop snare. I'm not sure of the name of this one. I'm pretty sure I've seen it in a couple old books, but it's a very simple snare as well. And let me get the camera reset and I will show you guys how to do this one. Okay guys, so to do we're going to use the same snare cordage clog that we used in that first part. The only difference is we need to run our snare up over a branch. Now when you're doing this, just to keep it from wanting to slide back, I'm going to put it right in front of this branch here so that I know my cordage is coming straight down and it doesn't have a lot of room to play, because when the animal gets caught in it, it's most likely going to want to go towards the tree. But that's where we're going to put our snare through. Thanks for that. Apparently I hit the unrecord button and went through my whole spiel and didn't record any of it. So let's try this for a second time. So what I've done is I've took my same clog from the first video and I've got it leaned up against the tree the same way. Now I'm going to give you a couple tips on this clog. Don't set it at an angle like that. Set it up here, because it's a lot easier for it to get pulled away and fall from up here than it is if you've got it set at an angle like that or like that. So try to get it pretty straight up and down to where it's not going to take much to pull it off of this tree here. I'm going to cut in here real quick, guys. So I'm showing this to you here. Now that may not work out for you the best sometimes. So, you know, if you've got to run it back to a different tree or what have you, it doesn't have to be right next to where this is all going to fall. You can put it, can probably make it work by putting it back over here as well. And run it up through and down. So it doesn't have to be right there, right next to where everything's going to happen at, where it's not going to take much to pull it off of this tree here. Another tip, when you're adjusting your length, don't roll this around your clog, because after this falls, if that animal's struggling, there's a chance he could struggle enough to unroll this and get himself enough slack that maybe he can get on the ground, maybe he can chew this apart. You know, just make sure this is tied on to the length you need it. I've got a knot where I can adjust it, but make sure it's stationary and it's not wrapped around this, because you don't want to give that animal any slack and a chance to get away. Now the advantage of using the clog drop snare over that first clog snare I showed you is this is going to stay in place. The animal cannot drag this clog down the trail. So you need to check this trap a little more often, because your animal is going to be suspended right up on a trail, and not just herbivores travel trails. So what I've done on this is I've ran this, there we go, I ran this up through this little nook right here, and this branch, it'll keep this from wanting to slide back too far, and I don't think it's going to want to slide this way very much, and that's just going to keep this a little more stationary. Now one issue with some of these primitive snares is your rope or your cordage going from your clog down to your snare. You can't always put as much tension on them as you would like, because it does not have a trigger system to hold that tension. So if you put too much tension on this thing, you can actually make this to where the wind will just blow it right and it could set your snare off. But you still want it tight, you don't want it loose and slack. But you can, with a lot of these primitive snares, you cannot get a lot of the tension that you can with some of the more complicated ones. Now I'm going to get you guys reset up here. Lasso through the nook in the tree. Now we're going to bring it down. Now how are we going to hold this open? Let's say we've got a rabbit trail running right here. I'm going to show you guys a real simple way. It's not always the most effective way, but it's very quick and easy to do. And you need to find some small branches that break very easy. Let's see, probably get some off of here. So what I got to do is hold this open. Now ideally you want this at a circle, because at a circle you've got as much area for that rabbit or whatever it is to get through that you can get, but that doesn't always work. So I'm going to show you with a triangle, it's still big enough that most animals will go through it. Now the bottom of this on a trail set snare, on a simple one like this, you want to make sure this is up off the ground. You don't want it on the ground so that that animal goes over it. You want it up off the ground a little bit so that it catches the animal. You want this, ideally you want this to catch around its neck, but if not all possible, you still want it to catch above his feet. Get up on the upper end of his legs or hindquarters or something. So we're going to do this as a triangle here. So we're going to take one of these sticks I got here, and we're going to push it in the ground at an angle, angling out away from the center of this snare here. And we'll leave it long for now. I'm gonna have to reset that one, it's not in there very good. Oh, broke on me. Go over here, find the other side. Put it in from that side. Okay, adjust our length some. Okay, so our snare is basically set there. So all our rabbit has to do, I'm going to raise it up just a little bit. Let's say it is a rabbit. This needs to get caught under his neck, and he needs to pull it free from these two pegs. This loop may be just a little big for a rabbit. That would maybe be more of a possum or a badger or raccoon or something size. So let's say we've got a raccoon there. I'm going to back up the view and show you how this trap will work. Okay guys, so we've got our clog, we've got our lasso through the nook on the branch down to two pegs stuck in the ground at angles going away from the center of this snare, and they're very thin, easy to break. They're not going to hold this snare up from coming loose, but it's going to hold it good enough to keep it where you need it until your animal comes through. So we've got our rabbit coming through here, or possum or whatever it is, and he gets caught on this and pulls this free of those sticks. So he's going to carry this, he's going to tighten up this snare around him, and as he goes down the trail, he's going to get to a point, and it's not going to be very far down the trail. He only has to go, you know, maybe a foot or two, but he's going to pull on this, and if you watch, he's going to drop that and hold him up. The bigger your animal, bigger the weight of your clog that you need. You know, if it was a deer, you may not be pulling the deer up off the ground. All you may be doing is strangling it with this, and with the deer, you would want this higher, you know, somewhere around where it's going to be going down the trail, going through. Whatever your animal is, you need to adjust your snare to that animal. But again, make sure this is up and down against the tree, not at a 45 or something. Up and down. We've got our trail, we've got our possum coming along, gets this caught on him, pulls the snare tight, gets to a point where he's tugging on this, pulls it from the tree, drops the clog, raises the animal up off the ground. Very simple and quick to do. You can set a lot of these in a limited amount of time. And then while these are hunting for you, and while some of those primitive deadfalls are hunting for you, you can be carving triggers and making cordage and other things to make more complicated traps that work better than these simple ones. But it's always good to know these simple ones. Hey guys, Chris here. So before I took down the clog snare I showed you, the drop clog snare, I wanted to use that same setup and show you another really primitive snare that you can build without any tools. I didn't use a knife or anything. I did one thing a little different on this one just because of how it worked out over here, but I'll show that to you guys. And this is a type of treadle bar, I guess you could call it, or treadle plate snare. And I'll show you what I did. So I used my same clog and I moved my tie point to the middle and raised it up in the tree. I'm going through that same nook I went through on those other two snares, or the second snare, excuse me. And then what I did down here, so I took some live saplings and I kind of wove them together into a ring. And I took a toggle stick and I went around that ring, and I've got a tread bar or treadle bar running all the way to this peg that's right here. I left all these branches on here just so it when the animal steps there, it's got more chances of setting this off. This is one I would probably put on a trail that the animal would step on. But I'll show you, I'm going to back this camera out and I'll show you this thing going off, and you can see how it works. Okay guys, so you can see here, that's my ring of saplings I wove together, and I've got a toggle stick, just a little stick about like yay, and I've got the rope tied on one end, and I've got it going underneath, and this tread bar that's running over this little stake here is the only thing that's keeping this from flipping up. Now you could, if you didn't have this, you could use a Y stick and drive it in the ground, use the crevice, or use a couple sticks with a bar running across or something. There's lots of different ways of doing this same concept right here. You just need to adapt to your situation and what materials you have laying around. So I'll show you, let's say we've got this animal coming along and they step on that bar and it sets off, drops the dead weight, or the dead man, drops that, and it didn't snare this little stick, but you can see how it would, or should, snare the animal. Now let me really quick set this guy up for you guys. So we'll get our weight raised up. You can see here, there is my toggle stick. We'll put it, I'm going to go from the front. That will allow me to have my treadle bar going across here lower to the ground. If I was to go the other way, I would have to hold it on the top here. And ideally you don't want it to really be set off anywhere other than where your treadle bar is at. Okay, and you could leave it like that and put your snare on it, or you can run some branches across here, just giving extra pressure points for the animal to step, set it off. You could brush it all in with leaves or what have you. It's just whatever you need. take our noose here, set it across our treadle bar there. And let's say my hand's the animal coming along, steps here. So that's a real simple way to make a trail set snare. And you could bait it and it would work for bait too.